My son-in-law laughed when he said it, not a big laugh, just enough for the people closest to him to hear. "Relax," he told his colleagues, lifting his glass. "My father-in-law is just a washed-up mechanic. Trust me, he doesn't understand real success." The rooftop of the Meridian Hotel in Seattle glittered with money and ego. City council members, assistant U.S. attorneys, 2 state judges. A tech CEO who donated heavily to political campaigns. This wasn't just a party, it was a coronation. And I was standing there in a borrowed blazer, holding a club soda, listening to my daughter's husband reduce me to a punchline. What Daniel Reyes didn't know, what no one in that crowd knew, was that for 26 years, I had dismantled international crime networks for a federal task force, so secret my name never appeared on paper. 4 hours later, the director of a 3-letter agency would walk into that same party with a sealed federal citation and a request marked urgent. Daniel thought he was mocking a nobody. He was wrong, but this didn't start that night. It started 3 years earlier, the day Daniel married my daughter, Sophia. Sophia is brilliant, cybercrimes attorney, fluent in 3 languages, sharp instincts, sharper ethics. She built her career from scratch and earned every inch of respect she received. Daniel, on the other hand, came from pedigree. His father had been a senior federal prosecutor. His mother sat on the board of a prestigious law school in California. The Reyes family produced judges, legal scholars, and political donors for 2 generations. The first time Daniel visited my auto shop in Tacoma, his face gave him away before his mouth did. "This is it?" he asked Sophia quietly, eyes scanning the oil-stained floor, the single hydraulic lift, the faded sign that read Miller Auto and Repair. 30 years running, I said, extending my hand. "I'm Aaron." He shook it loosely. "Interesting retirement plan." That was the moment he decided who I was. From then on, I became a detail he mentioned with just enough pause to signal embarrassment. "This is Sophia's dad," he'd say at dinners. "He runs a small repair shop near the docks, always small, always near the docks, as if geography could explain worth." I noticed, Sophia noticed, but I stayed quiet. I'd been trained to stay quiet. The second incident came at Daniel's promotion dinner. He'd just been appointed Deputy Director of Financial Crimes for King County. Big step, bigger ego. Over steaks and expensive wine at a private club, Daniel told a story loud enough for me to hear. "My father-in-law didn't exactly choose the academic route," he said with a grin. "But hey, someone's got to keep the rest of us on the road." Polite laughter followed, the kind people use when they sense cruelty but don't want to challenge it. Sophia squeezed my arm. "Dad, I'm sorry. He's sober," I said quietly. "This isn't the alcohol," she didn't argue. The third moment, the one that mattered, came months later. Daniel was preparing a major case. A financial syndicate laundering money through shell companies and offshore accounts. The kind of operation that looked clean until you knew where to dig. He was pacing my living room, rehearsing. "This case is airtight," he said. 10 years of digital trails, international cooperation. "These guys are done." I lowered my newspaper. "You might want to request additional security," I said calmly. "Groups like that don't panic, they wait." Daniel stopped and stared at me. "Security advice from a mechanic, it's just experience." "With what?" he laughed. "Fixing carburetors." Sophia shot him a look. I raised a hand, let it go. What Daniel didn't know was that I had spent 3 years embedded overseas, using fake passports and dead names, sitting at tables with men who killed without blinking. I'd watched patient criminals dismantle prosecutors who thought paperwork made them untouchable, but my past was sealed, classified, buried on purpose. After decades of living under threat, I chose grease and engines over guns and aliases. I wanted conversations about brake pads, not body counts. Daniel saw a 61-year-old man with oil under his nails and a modest income. He never asked why federal numbers still called my phone at odd hours. He never asked why I carried myself the way I did. He never asked anything. And then came the celebration. Daniel's big victory party, scheduled months in advance. $250,000 on a rooftop overlooking Elliott Bay. Sophia helped pay for it, drained her savings to keep up with family standards. When she suggested something smaller, Daniel shut it down. "My name is about to matter," he said. "Appearances count." A week before the event, Sophia called me late. "Dad, Daniel doesn't want you sitting at the main table." I went quiet. "He says it might send the wrong message." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about me anymore. This was about control. If Daniel could make Sophia ashamed of her father, he could shape how she saw herself. I had stayed silent for decades because silence kept people alive. But this time, silence was hurting my daughter, so I made a decision. "Tell him I'll be there," I said, "front table. And I'll be bringing a guest, someone who's been keeping my secrets for a long time." The party was in 2 weeks. Daniel thought it was his moment to shine. He had no idea he'd chosen the worst possible stage. The The 2 weeks leading up to Daniel's celebration were some of the quietest I'd experienced in years, and that made me uneasy. Silence has a sound when you've lived long enough in the shadows. It hums, it waits. Sophia tried to act normal, but I could see the strain. She stopped dropping by the shop. Our weekly lunches disappeared. When we spoke, she chose her words carefully, like everything was a negotiation. Daniel, meanwhile, grew bolder. At a dinner with Sophia's colleagues, he raised his glass and said, "Not everyone gets lucky in life. Some of us build careers, others settle into simpler routines." Then he smiled at me like he'd said something generous. I nodded and kept eating. People like Daniel mistake silence for weakness. In my old life, that mistake got men killed, but this wasn't an operation. This was family, and that made it harder. 3 days before the party, the first crack appeared. I was closing the shop when my secure phone vibrated, the one I hadn't used in months. I stepped into the back room before answering. "Aaron," a familiar voice said, calm, controlled. Dangerous in its authority. It's Director Elaine Porter. I closed my eyes. "Not a great week, Elaine. I know, that's why I'm calling. Your son-in-law's case triggered something." Of course it did. The financial syndicate Daniel prosecuted wasn't as cleanly severed as he believed. Old money had long memories, and newer players were trying to resurrect dormant channels. "They recognized your name," Porter continued. "Not publicly, internally." I leaned against the tool cabinet. "I've been careful. You always are, but the celebration, media presence, political figures, it creates exposure." "I won't disappear," I said. "Not this time." There was a pause. Then we need eyes on you, light touch, no disruption. "Do not embarrass my daughter." "We won't," Porter said, "but if things go sideways, I'm stepping in." That was the moment I knew the night wouldn't end quietly. The next incident happened the morning of the event. We were doing a walkthrough at the Meridian Hotel when two men in tailored suits approached me near the elevators. Their posture gave them away immediately. Government training never quite leaves the shoulders. "Mr. Miller," one asked. Daniel's head snapped up. "Yes, just verifying your attendance this evening for security coordination." Daniel frowned. Security coordination for him. The agent glanced at Daniel, then back to me. "Routine protocol." Daniel followed them with his eyes as they walked away. His smile didn't return. "What was that about?" he asked. "No idea," I said. "Hotels are cautious these days." He didn't buy it. Neither did I. Then came the envelope. A courier delivered it to my room, heavy paper, embossed seal. Daniel happened to be standing there when I signed for it. He read the return address and froze. "Office of the Director, Federal Operations." "Looks like it." Daniel laughed once. "You expect me to believe that's junk mail? Government loves fancy envelopes." "Aaron," he said sharply, "if you're involved in something that could reflect badly on me." "I'm not involved in anything," I said. "Relax, it's your night." But he was unraveling. The small, tidy version of me he'd built in his head was starting to crack. At the pre-event dinner that night, Daniel finally lost control. Surrounded by close family and selected guests, he stood to make a toast. "This weekend," he said, "is about achievement, about legacy, about knowing who you are and being proud of it." His eyes drifted to me. "Some people aim high. Others are comfortable staying exactly where they started." The table went quiet. Sophia stiffened. I stood. "May I?" I asked calmly. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. I raised my glass. "To perspective, some people chase recognition. Others spend their lives making sure chaos doesn't reach the door. Both paths exist for a reason." I sat back down. Daniel's jaw tightened. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. After dinner, he pulled Sophia aside. I didn't need to eavesdrop. His voice carried. "Your father embarrassed me." He defended himself. "In front of my parents. He's my father. He's a mechanic." Daniel snapped. "This crowd matters." That's when I stepped into view. "Problem?" I asked. Daniel flushed. "We're discussing optics." "I've spent my whole life around optics," I said evenly. "They rarely show the full picture." He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Friday night," he said, lowering his voice. "People who matter will be watching." "I know," I replied. "They always are." He walked away uneasy. That night, Sophia came to my room. "Dad," she said quietly, "what aren't you telling us?" I looked at my daughter, the same child I once watched through bulletproof glass from across the street in another country. "Some truths," I said, "change more than they fix." She swallowed. "Daniel thinks you're hiding something." "I am," she nodded slowly. "Then I trust you, but please don't let this destroy everything." I held her hands. "Tomorrow," I said, "everything that needs to be seen will be." The celebration was hours away. Daniel thought he was hosting a victory. He had no idea he was standing on the edge of a reckoning. The night of the celebration arrived wrapped in fog rolling in from the bay, the kind that softens city lights and makes everything look cleaner than it really is. By the time Sophia and I reached the rooftop of the Meridian Hotel, the place was already buzzing. Crystal chandeliers reflected off glass walls. A live quartet played soft jazz. Servers moved like clockwork, carrying trays of champagne and canapes that cost more than an oil change at my shop. Daniel was in his element, tailored suit, perfect posture, that polished confidence people mistake for leadership. He moved through the crowd shaking hands, laughing loudly, name-dropping just enough to remind everyone why they were there. I watched him from a distance, unnoticed, and saw what he didn't realize he was showing: relief. This party wasn't just celebration, it was armor, proof that he belonged where he believed he belonged. Sophia stayed close to me at first, but Daniel eventually pulled her away, positioning her beside him like part of the display. I didn't blame her, she was trying to survive the night. That's when I started noticing familiar faces. A woman near the bar with still gray hair and a posture too controlled for politics. She caught my eye and gave the slightest nod. Deputy Director Hannah Cole. We'd crossed paths in Eastern Europe 15 years earlier. Near the windows, a tall man in a dark suit speaking quietly with hotel security. Former intelligence liaison. I'd once pulled him out of a burning safe house. Daniel saw none of this. To him, they were just important people. The first real tension came during cocktail hour. Daniel was introducing his parents to donors when he noticed me speaking with an older man in a navy suit. He approached quickly. "Excuse me," Daniel said, smile tight. "I don't believe we've met." The man turned. "Thomas Avery," he said, "Federal Oversight Committee." Daniel's eyes lit up. "And you know my father-in-law?" Avery glanced at me. I gave a small shake of my head. "We've collaborated on risk assessments," Avery said carefully. Daniel laughed. "He runs an auto shop. Risk assessments must mean inspections." Avery studied Daniel for a moment, then nodded politely and excused himself. The moment he was gone, Daniel grabbed my arm. "Enough," he hissed. "People like him don't just collaborate with mechanics." "Let it go," I said. "Enjoy your night." But Daniel couldn't. The pattern was forming, judges nodding at me, federal staff greeting me by name, security quietly adjusting their positions when I moved. At dinner, Daniel barely touched his food. When it came time for speeches, his father spoke first. Long, traditional remarks about justice, discipline, and legacy. Polite applause. Sophia followed. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "I'm proud of my husband," she said, "and grateful to everyone who shaped us into who we are." She glanced at me for half a second. That was enough. Then Daniel stood. The room quieted. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he began. "Tonight has been enlightening." That word carried weight. For years, I believed I knew my family. I believed honesty was the foundation of everything we stand for. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but recognition. Daniel turned slightly, angling his body toward me. "But tonight, I've realized how little we sometimes know about the people closest to us." Murmurs rippled through the room. "My father-in-law," Daniel continued, "has always presented himself as a simple auto mechanic." Every eye moved to me. But tonight, federal officials verify his presence. Senior authorities greet him like a colleague. And sealed government correspondence arrives with his name on it. Sophia reached for his arm. "Daniel, stop," he pulled away. "If there's something we should know," he said, voice rising, "don't you think it's fair to say it? Especially when my reputation is on the line." The room was silent now, not awkward, alert. Daniel pointed his glass toward me. "So tell us, Aaron, what do you really do?" I stood slowly. "Are you sure you want this answered publicly?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "I want the truth." I looked around the room. Some faces were tense, some curious, a few already knew. I reached into my jacket and removed the sealed envelope. "This arrived today," I said calmly. "You seemed interested earlier." Daniel's face drained of color. I broke the seal. "By directive of the Federal Operations Council," I read, "this letter serves as formal acknowledgement of Aaron Michael Miller, retired operative for 26 years of service across joint international task forces." The whispering exploded. Daniel staggered backward. I continued, my voice steady. "Including undercover deployments between 1994 and 2007, prevention of multiple high-risk threats to federal officials, and commendations for operational integrity under extreme duress." I folded the letter. "For most of my adult life," I said, "my name was classified. My work was invisible by design." Daniel gripped the edge of the table. "You lied," he whispered. "No," I replied. "You assumed." That's when Director Porter stepped forward. "For clarity," she said into the microphone someone had handed her, "Aaron Miller is one of the most effective operatives this agency has ever had. Much of the financial case celebrated tonight relies on networks he dismantled 15 years ago." Daniel's knees buckled. Sophia caught him. The room erupted, not in applause yet, but in realization. Everything Daniel had built his identity on was collapsing in real time, and I wasn't finished. For a moment, no one spoke. 200 people, politicians, judges, donors, executives, stood frozen beneath crystal lights, trying to recalibrate everything they thought they understood. I could feel the shift in the air, the same one that used to happen in briefing rooms when a classified truth finally surfaced. Daniel looked like he'd been punched in the chest. This isn't funny, he said, his voice thin. This is some kind of stunt. Director Porter didn't blink. Mr. Reyes, this is not a stunt. She turned slightly so the room could see her clearly. My name is Elaine Porter, Director, Federal Operations Council. That did it. The murmurs turned into a wave. Phones slipped from pockets. Judges exchanged looks. A city councilman actually sat down like his legs had given up. Daniel shook his head. No, he changes tires. He lives in a rented duplex. He drives a 20-year-old truck. I met his eyes. All true, but that doesn't make sense. It does, I said quietly. If you stop measuring people by what they show. Porter nodded toward the band. The music had stopped entirely now. For decades, she said, Mr. Miller worked in environments where attention meant death. When he retired, continued anonymity was not a preference, it was a requirement. She looked directly at Daniel. Many of the criminal structures your office investigates today exist in altered form because of his work. Daniel turned to Sophia, desperate. You knew? She shook her head slowly, tears forming. No, I just knew you were wrong about him. That hurt him more than anything Porter could have said. Then the room changed again. A woman stood up near the center tables. I'm Judge Marilyn Kessler, she said. I presided over 7 financial crime cases between 2010 and 2018. All of them were built on evidence originating from Miller's task force. Another man followed. State Senator Lewis. He pulled me out of a compromised convoy in Morocco, saved my life. Then another. Then another. Daniel watched his own audience turn into a witness stand. The people he had tried to impress were now defining him by the way he treated the man he thought was beneath him. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. Porter leaned toward me. There's more in the letter. I nodded and reopened it. Effective immediately, I read. You are requested for limited reactivation as a strategic consultant due to renewed activity linked to dormant financial networks previously neutralized under your leadership. The words limited reactivation rippled through the crowd. A judge whispered they don't use that term lightly. Daniel sank into his chair. Sophia sat beside him rigid. She didn't touch him. You could have told me, Daniel said hoarsely. I finally let some edge into my voice. You could have asked. Silence. For 3 years he never had. Porter cleared her throat. There is also a security consideration, she said. Given tonight's exposure, Mr. Miller will be provided protective oversight during his transition. Daniel looked up sharply. Protection from what? From people who don't forget, Porter replied, and from those who believe humiliation should be repaid. That landed. Daniel suddenly understood that my quiet life wasn't a failure, it was survival. The applause started slowly, one table, then another. Then the entire room rose, not for me, for the truth. I didn't smile, I didn't bow. I just stood there while Daniel Ray's world finished collapsing. When the noise finally died down, Daniel tried one last time to reclaim control. This isn't fair, he said. My entire career was built on work you didn't do, Porter said calmly. That's not an accusation. It's a fact. She turned to the audience. And I want to be clear, Mr. Ray's conviction stands. His legal work was sound, but judgment isn't only about case law. She let that settle. It's about character. The word hit harder than any sentence. Dinner ended shortly after. Conversations resumed, but they were different now. Quieter, heavier. People came to speak to me, thank me, shake my hand. I accepted politely, briefly. This wasn't why I'd come. I found Sophia on the terrace overlooking the water. The city lights reflected in her eyes. You okay? I asked. She laughed softly. No. But I will be. Behind us, Daniel sat alone at the head table, untouched dessert in front of him. He was finally small. Later that night, as guests began to leave, a senior official from the ethics committee approached Daniel. Mr. Reyes, he said gently, will be in touch. There are concerns. Daniel nodded numbly. Sophia watched him, then turned back to me. You didn't destroy him, she said. No, I replied. He did that himself. The celebration that was meant to crown him had done something else entirely. It had exposed him, and this was only the beginning. The morning after the celebration, the city woke up buzzing. Not with gossip. Seattle had seen enough scandals to be numb, but with something sharper. Unease. The kind that settles in when powerful people realize they witnessed something that will ripple outward whether they like it or not. By 9 a.m. my phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Numbers I hadn't seen in years, blocked lines, secure channels lighting up like it was 2006 again. I ignored most of them. Sophia called first. Dad, she said, her voice flat from lack of sleep. Daniel hasn't come home. I wasn't surprised. He left after you did, she continued. Didn't answer his phone. His parents called me at 6 in the morning. Are you safe? I asked. Yes, I stayed with a friend. That mattered more than anything else. Good, I said. Take the day. Don't explain anything to anyone. She hesitated. They're already explaining it for us. She wasn't wrong. By noon, clips from the celebration were everywhere. Not the whole event, just the part that mattered. Daniel's toast, his question, the silence, my answer. Someone had recorded it from 3 different angles. Another guest caught Director Porter's confirmation. Someone else captured the applause. Edited together, it told a clean story. Arrogant official mocks working-class father-in-law. Discovers he's a decorated federal operative. Views climbed into the hundreds of thousands. The comments were brutal. Daniel Reyes had spent his career prosecuting white-collar criminals, lecturing them about accountability. Now the internet had turned that spotlight on him. And it didn't miss. By afternoon, Daniel's office called him in. "I know this because his father called me." "Aaron," Judge Reyes said stiffly, "we need to talk." "No," I replied, "you need to talk to your son." There was a long pause. "You humiliated our family," I exhaled slowly. "Your son did that." Click. Director Porter arrived at my shop that evening. No convoy, no spectacle. Just a sedan parked crookedly outside like any other customer. She stepped inside, glanced around at the oil-stained floor, the cracked vinyl chairs, the hand-painted sign. "This place fits you," she said. "I chose it." She handed me a thin folder. "Official offer," she said. "Consulting only. No field work, you say no, we walk away." I didn't open it. "What about Sophia?" I asked. "We're aware of the marital situation. If she needs legal protection, it'll be discreet." That was enough. "I'll review cases," I said. "Nothing public," Porter nodded. "Understood." Then she hesitated. "He never knew, did he?" "No, and you never corrected him." "I didn't need to." She studied me for a long moment. "Some people would call that cruel. Some people have never been quietly humiliated for years," I said. Porter didn't argue. Meanwhile, Daniel was spiraling. By the end of the week, 3 judges had formally requested recusal from any case involving him. Not because he broke the law, but because they couldn't trust his judgment. The message was subtle but devastating. The district office reassigned him to administrative review pending evaluation. No press release, no public shaming. Just a slow professional suffocation. Sophia came to see me on Friday. She sat on the worn stool by the tool rack, staring at the floor. "He keeps saying this wouldn't have happened if you told him the truth," she said. I wiped my hands on a rag. "And what do you think?" She looked up. "I think he's angry because the hierarchy he believed in wasn't real." She swallowed. "He never apologized, not really. Just kept saying he was embarrassed. That told me everything." "I want a divorce," she said quietly. I nodded. No relief, no triumph, just sadness. "You'll be okay," I said, "but it's going to hurt first." She smiled weakly. "I learned that from you." The Reyes family fallout was swift. Daniel's mother resigned from 2 boards within days. His father announced early retirement, citing health reasons. People who once rushed to be seen with them suddenly remembered other appointments. Power doesn't abandon you loudly, it just stops returning your calls. 2 weeks later, Daniel finally showed up at the shop. He looked smaller, thinner. Like a man who'd lost the story he told himself about who he was. "I didn't know," he said. "I know. You let me believe you were nothing." "No," I said. "I let you believe I was less than you." He flinched. "I respected the uniform," he said. "I just didn't respect the man without it." "That's the problem," I replied. "The uniform was never the point." He opened his mouth, closed it. There was nothing left to say. As he walked out, I realized something. The most dangerous thing about arrogance isn't that it blinds you to others, it blinds you to yourself. And Daniel Reyes had finally seen his reflection, too late. The weeks after Daniel came to the shop passed in a strange calm, like the quiet after a controlled demolition. Everything important had already fallen. What remained was debris, emails, meetings, whispers, consequences still settling into place. Sophia moved quickly. She filed for divorce without drama, without demands, no public statements, no interviews. She asked for space and took it. A small apartment near Green Lake, new routines, early mornings, long walks. Therapy appointments she didn't skip. Daniel tried to fight the optics at first. He hired a public relations firm, issued a carefully worded apology. Stress, misjudgment, deep respect for public servants of all backgrounds. The language was perfect. The timing wasn't. People weren't angry anymore. They were disappointed, and disappointment doesn't forgive, it disengages. Behind closed doors, his situation worsened. The ethics committee opened a formal review, not for corruption. For conduct, for misuse of authority in private settings, for creating an environment that reflected poorly on the office. Those cases rarely end well. One afternoon, Director Porter called. "They're asking questions about your involvement," she said. "Not to investigate you, to understand him." I almost laughed. "Do they want a character reference?" "No," she said. "They want to know how someone with his background could be so blind." "That's not something you learn from files," I replied. At the shop, life went on. Customers still came in with squeaky brakes and dying alternators. Some recognized me now, most didn't. A few tried to ask questions. I shut that down gently. "This is still an auto shop," I said, "not a confessional." One evening, an older man named Carl, retired dock worker, regular customer, waited until we were alone. "They say you were something big," he said. I was something useful, I replied. He nodded. Ain't the same thing. Exactly. Daniel's reassignment became official a month later. Administrative review, no courtroom appearances. No media-facing role, a holding pattern designed to encourage resignation without forcing it. He didn't resign, not yet. Sophia received a message from him one night. I don't know who I am without the work. She showed it to me. That's not an apology, she said. No, I agreed. That's fear. She didn't respond. The divorce finalized quietly. No courtroom drama, no property disputes, just signatures and silence. Daniel didn't contest it. Pride can survive humiliation, but not emptiness. The day after the papers were signed, he showed up again, not at the shop, at my apartment. He looked exhausted, unshaven, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. I lost my office, he said flatly. They gave it to someone younger. I waited. My father doesn't return my calls, he continued. My mother says I need to rebuild character. I opened the door wider and let him in. He stood awkwardly, unsure where to put himself. I thought success insulated me, he said. That it explained everything. I poured coffee. Success doesn't insulate, I said. It exposes. He nodded slowly. I don't know how to live without measuring myself against others. That was the first honest thing he'd ever said to me. I never hated you, he added quickly. I just didn't see you. That's worse, I replied gently. But it's fixable. How? You stop ranking people. Silence. I don't know if I can, he admitted. That's not my problem to solve. He left soon after. No anger, no confrontation, just resignation. Weeks later, news traveled quietly through legal circles. Daniel Reyes had accepted a position at a small private firm out of state. No leadership role, no visibility, just work. It was a long fall, but not a fatal one. Sophia heard it secondhand. Good, she said simply. Her life was moving forward. She took on pro bono cases, focused on data privacy and civil liberties, work that mattered but didn't perform. One night as we closed the shop together, she asked me something she'd been holding back. Dad, she said, why didn't you ever correct him? Even once. I thought about it. Because the moment I defended myself, I said, I would have taught him that status is what deserves defense. She nodded slowly. You let him fail his own test. Yes, she smiled faintly. That's very you. That night after she left, I stood alone in the shop. Old stained floor, old tools, familiar smells. I thought about how many lives I'd lived, how many names I'd carried, how many versions of myself had been necessary at different times. This one, the quiet mechanic, was the only one that felt real. Daniel had mistaken humility for weakness. The world corrected him. And in doing so, it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Peace isn't the absence of power. It's choosing not to use it when you don't have to. Time has a way of sanding down sharp edges. By early autumn, the story that once dominated feeds and conversations had softened into a reference point, a lesson people half remembered, retold without names. The internet moved on. It always does. But consequences don't move on so easily. Daniel's departure from the city didn't erase what happened. In legal circles, his name became shorthand, not for incompetence, but for arrogance left unchecked. Don't pull a raise, someone joked once at a conference. That kind of legacy sticks. Sophia, meanwhile, was thriving in quiet ways. She took on fewer clients, but tougher ones, whistleblowers, data misuse cases. People with no leverage except truth. Her work didn't come with gala dinners or awards. It came with long nights and occasional wins that never made headlines. She liked it that way. One afternoon, she stopped by the shop with lunch and an unfamiliar smile. I met someone, she said casually. I raised an eyebrow. Is this the part where I pretend not to be protective? She laughed. His name's Evan. High school science teacher, makes terrible coffee, drives a 12-year-old sedan. Good start, I said. She smiled. He asked what you did. I told him you fix things. That's accurate. He didn't ask what kind. Even better. Daniel called me once that month, just once. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. No excuses, no explanations, just the words. I let the silence stretch. Thank you, I said finally, for what it's worth. We didn't speak again. Some apologies are acknowledgments, not bridges. Director Porter kept her word. My consulting work stayed invisible. I reviewed files, flagged patterns, wrote quiet memos that never carried my name. Occasionally, a younger analyst would ask how I saw something they missed. I always gave the same answer. Look past the obvious. One case in particular caught my attention. A revived financial network using outdated laundering methods, nostalgic almost. Someone trying to resurrect a system I dismantled years ago. I flagged it. 2 months later, indictments dropped. No press conference. No mention of me. Perfect. One evening, as I locked up the shop, Carl the dockworker stopped by again. You ever miss it? He asked. The old life. I thought about it. No, I said, but I respect it. He nodded. Same way I feel about the docks. Exactly. Sophia brought Evan by a few weeks later. He was polite, nervous, honest in that way people are when they don't perform confidence. He shook my hand firmly. Mr. Miller, he said, Sophia says you taught her how to stand her ground. I taught her how to ask questions, I replied. She did the rest. Evan smiled. When they left, Sophia lingered. Thank you, she said. For what? For not becoming what you could have been. I understood what she meant. Power has gravity. It pulls at you, reshapes you if you let it. I'd spent years resisting it, not because I was noble, but because I'd seen what it did to people like Daniel. Later that night, I received a message on the secure line. You were right to stay quiet. No signature. I deleted it. Winter crept in. The shop heater rattled. Business slowed. Life narrowed into routines. One morning, I found a small envelope taped to the shop door. Inside was a handwritten note. I teach my students about ethical responsibility. Your story came up, not the details, just the lesson. Thank you, no name. I folded it carefully and put it in the drawer with my old credentials. Some truths don't need proof, they just need time. Daniel's story ended the way many do, not with redemption or ruin, but with reduction. Smaller stage. Lower volume, a chance to learn if he chose to. Sophia's story was still unfolding. And mine had come full circle. I had lived as a ghost, then as a symbol, then as a warning. Now I was simply a man who fixed things that broke. And that was enough. Winter settled in hard that year. Not dramatically, no storms worthy of headlines, but with the kind of cold that seeps into routines and forces honesty. Business slowed at the shop. People delayed repairs. Engines complained louder in the mornings. Life felt stripped down and I welcomed it. That's when the past tried to knock again. The call came on a Tuesday night just after 10. Secure line, one ring. Aaron, Director Porter said, skipping pleasantries, we have movement. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from my mug. From where? Old channels, offshore accounts that should have stayed dormant. Someone is funding a rebuild using a hybrid of methods from 2 decades ago. I closed my eyes. They're copying a system they don't fully understand. Yes, she said. And they're asking questions about you. That part didn't surprise me. When, I asked, soon enough that we're concerned, not enough to panic. I exhaled slowly. What do you need? Perspective, pattern recognition. Nothing operational, that's all you'll get. Understood. After the call, I didn't sleep, not from fear, habit. Old instincts don't retire when you do, they just wait. The next morning, Sophia stopped by unexpectedly. You look tired, she said, setting down coffee. I am. She studied me for a moment. Is it happening again? I considered lying, then decided not to. Not like before, I said, but close enough to pay attention. She nodded. Do you want me to worry? No, I said honestly. I want you to live. She smiled faintly. I am, she was. Evan had moved from someone she was seeing to someone who stayed. He fixed things around her apartment. Graded papers at the kitchen table. Asked questions not because he suspected something, but because he cared. That mattered. The file Porter sent later that week was thick, familiar, disappointing in its predictability. Men trying to resurrect an empire without understanding why it fell in the first place. They'd missed the most important lesson. Organizations don't collapse because of force. They collapse because trust erodes. I wrote my assessment in plain language. No jargon, no recommendations, just observations. They will overreach. They always do. They believe silence means safety. They will expose themselves. Porter replied with a single line. That's what we thought. A few days later, something strange happened at the shop. A man I didn't recognize came in just before closing. Mid-40s, clean hands, expensive coat trying not to look expensive. He asked for an oil change. I watched him carefully as I worked. He asked the wrong questions, too casual, too curious. You ever think about retiring? He asked. Every day, I replied. You've had an interesting life, he said lightly. Everyone has, he smiled thinly, paid in cash, left. I noted his license plate from memory. That night I sent Porter a message. Someone's checking the edges. Her reply was immediate. We saw him too. Good. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Weeks passed, then months, quiet work, quiet monitoring. Then one morning, headlines broke, not about me, not about Daniel, not about the past. A multinational financial sting, accounts frozen. Shell companies dismantled, no dramatic arrests, no speeches, just closure. Porter called later that night. You were right, she said, they overreached. Do they know why? I asked. No, she admitted, and they never will. That was fine. Sophia came by that weekend with Evan. Snow clung to their coats. They laughed about something small and unimportant. I watched them from the shop doorway and felt something loosen in my chest. Later, Sophia lingered again. Dad, she said, do you ever think about what would have happened if Daniel hadn't pushed? Yes, I said. Nothing would have changed, and that would have been worse. She nodded. I'm glad the truth came out. So am I, not because it redeemed me, but because it freed her. That night, as I locked up, I thought about how close I'd come again to being pulled back into something bigger than myself, and how easily I'd stepped away. That's what peace really is, not distance from danger, but clarity about what matters enough to face it and what matters enough to walk away. Spring returned quietly, like it had nothing to prove. The shop doors stayed open longer. The air lost its edge. People talked more while they waited, about gardens, kids, plans, ordinary things. The kind of conversations that once would have felt like cover stories but now felt like anchors. Sophia stopped by less often. Not because we'd grown distant, but because she was building something new. A rhythm that didn't revolve around recovering from damage. She still called every Sunday. Daniel never did again. I heard about him the way you hear about people who drift out of orbit. Second-hand, vague. He was working steadily, keeping his head down. Learning, maybe. Good. One afternoon, a young man came into the shop with a rattling engine and nervous energy. He couldn't have been older than 25, fresh suit, law school confidence not yet tempered by failure. "You're Aaron Miller?" he asked. "That's what the sign says." He smiled awkwardly. "I'm clerking for a judge downtown. My supervisor suggested I talk to you." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About perspective." I laughed, couldn't help it. He explained that he'd watched the video months earlier, not the viral cut, the full version someone had archived. He'd expected drama, instead he saw something else. "You didn't enjoy it," he said. "You weren't trying to win." "No," I agreed. "I was trying to finish." He nodded slowly. "I've been taught that success means visibility," he said. "But everyone I respect seems to avoid it." "That's because visibility attracts the wrong tests," I said. "You get measured on things that don't matter." He wrote that down like it was scripture. After he left, I wondered how many people had taken the wrong lesson from that night, and how many had taken the right one. That mattered more than I expected. Sophia invited me to dinner one Friday. Her apartment felt lived in. Plants on the windowsill, books stacked unevenly, Evan cooking something ambitious and failing loudly. He apologized 3 times. I liked him more each time. During dinner, Sophia told me she'd been offered a position with a nonprofit that handled cross-border data rights. "It's not glamorous," she said. "It pays less than my old job." "Does it let you sleep?" I asked. "Yes, take it." She smiled. After dessert, Evan asked me something carefully. "Do you ever worry that people only respect you now because of what they found out?" I appreciated the honesty. "Yes," I said. "That's why I keep doing this." I gestured around the room, not the shop, not the apartment, but the moment. "This doesn't change," he nodded, understanding. On the walk home, Sophia linked her arm through mine. "You taught me something without meaning to," she said. "What's that?" "That dignity doesn't need witnesses." That stayed with me. Later that month, Director Porter stopped by again unannounced. She handed me a small envelope. "Commendation," she said. "Internal, no ceremony." I didn't open it. "Why now?" I asked. "Because people like Daniel are loud," she said. "People like you are rare," I sighed. "I didn't ask for recognition." "I know," she replied. "That's why you get it." I accepted the envelope, put it in the drawer with the note from the teacher. Some things you keep not to remember but to contextualize. As spring edged into summer, the shop hit a steady rhythm. No drama, no calls, no visitors with expensive coats, just engines and hands and time. One evening, as I locked up, I caught my reflection in the glass. Older, slower, calmer, not invisible, just unassuming. That night, Sophia called. "Dad," she said softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For waiting, for not rescuing me. For letting me choose." I closed my eyes. That was the hardest part, not revealing the truth, but trusting that she'd find it on her own. "Anytime," I said. "The truth is, the story everyone remembers isn't the one I'd tell. They remember the fall, I remember the aftermath, the quiet corrections, the small repairs. The people who adjusted their lives by a few degrees because they saw something real. That's how change actually works, not in explosions, but in recalibration, and that's when I knew the chapter was almost closed. The older you get, the more endings start to look alike. Not dramatic, not loud, just complete. By the time summer settled in, nothing from that night felt sharp anymore. The story had finished telling itself. What remained were the quieter consequences, the ones that don't trend, don't get recorded, but last longer than applause ever could. The shop was busy again, steady, honest work. I liked the rhythm of it, open early, close on time. No secrets hiding behind routine, just life being life. One afternoon, Sophia stopped by with paperwork tucked under her arm. "I signed the offer," she said. I smiled. "How does it feel?" "Lighter," she answered. "Like I'm finally working towards something instead of proving something." That was the real win. Daniel never reached out again. I heard later, much later, that he'd settled into his new role. No promotions, no scandals, just competence. Maybe humility if he was lucky. I didn't wish him harm, I wished him clarity. Some people only learn after the noise stops. Director Porter called one last time near the end of the year. "No more active threads," she said. "Everything you flagged is closed." "Good," I replied. "You've officially disappeared again," she added, almost amused. "That was always the plan." She paused. "You know, if you ever wanted." "No," I said gently. "I'm exactly where I should be." She understood. A week later, I cleaned out the drawer at the shop. Old receipts, broken tools, that small stack of reminders from another life. The commendation, the handwritten note. A worn photo from years ago that I didn't remember taking. I put them in a box and slid it onto a high shelf at home. Not hidden, just not displayed. Sophia and Evan came over for dinner that Sunday. He talked about his students, she talked about her cases. They argued lightly about nothing important. At one point, Evan looked at me and said, "You know, most people chase significance their whole lives." I waited. "You seem like someone who already had it," he continued, and gave it back. I nodded, because significance isn't something you own, it's something you pass through. Later, after they left, Linda, who'd stayed in the background of this whole story the way she always had, sat beside me. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said. She smiled. "Good, because I never wanted a legend. I wanted a husband who came home." That was the truth. No one applauded. Months passed. The video stopped circulating. New scandals replaced it. New villains, new heroes, but occasionally someone would come into the shop and pause like they recognized something they couldn't quite place. They never asked. I respected that. One evening, as I locked up, a young boy waiting with his father watched me work. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly. "Do what?" "Fix cars," he said. "You seem smart." I crouched down so we were eye level. "Because things break," I said, "and someone has to help." He considered that. His father smiled at me like he understood something important. As they left, I felt it, that sense of closure you don't get often in life. The story was finished. Not because everyone learned their lesson, but because the right people learned the right ones. Daniel learned that status without character collapses. Sophia learned that love doesn't require self-erasure. And I learned that silence, when chosen, not imposed, is a kind of freedom. If I could say one thing to the version of myself who first stepped into that shop years ago, it would be this: you didn't walk away from power. You walked toward peace, and peace, real peace, is earned, not with medals, not with titles, but with the quiet confidence that you don't need to explain who you are to anyone, because the people who matter already know, and the rest, they were never really listening anyway.